Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. The night was unusually still, the kind that makes you reflect on life's choices. I sat on our porch, a glass of scotch in hand, the amber liquid mirroring the tumult in my heart. It began as a fleeting thrill. I murmured to the stars, but now, it's my greatest regret. 7 years ago, life was different. Linda, my wife, was the epitome of vibrancy and passion. Our meeting was no less than a scene from a romantic novel, introduced by a mutual friend at a cozy downtown cafe. Michael, meet Linda. Linda, Michael. I'll leave you two to it, our friend had said with a wink. Linda's laugh was infectious, her eyes sparkling with life. So, you're the famous software engineer at Google I've heard so much about, she teased, sipping her coffee. And you're the star saleswoman who's been turning the insurance world on its head, I replied, captivated by her charm. Our conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything, from our favorite books to the most mundane details of our daily lives. It was effortless, natural. I haven't laughed this much in ages, Linda confessed as we walked out of the cafe. Neither have I admitted, feeling a connection I hadn't felt in years. As time passed, our casual meetings turned into late-night conversations, dinners, and eventually, a relationship. Linda was a breath of fresh air, bringing color into my monochromatic life. Michael, let's make this official, she'd said one starlit evening. I don't want to spend another day without you. I remember smiling, holding her close. I can't imagine a life without you in it, I replied. 2 years of bliss followed, culminating in our wedding. It was a simple affair, just close friends and family. To a lifetime of happiness, we toasted, our hearts full of love and dreams. But life has a way of testing love. 5 years into our marriage, things began to change. I got a promotion at work, a recognition I had long awaited. But it came with a price, longer hours and endless responsibilities. I'm proud of you, Michael, Linda said, her smile not reaching her eyes. But I miss you. I'll make it up to you, I promised. But deep down, I knew my work was consuming me. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Our conversations became brief, our intimate moments rare. I come home exhausted, my mind still tangled in codes and algorithms. Michael, we need to talk, Linda said one evening, her voice tinged with frustration. You're always tired, always distracted. I feel like I'm living with a stranger. I'm sorry, Linda, I replied, feeling a pang of guilt. Work has been crazy. I promise it'll get better. But it didn't. My absence created a void in our marriage, a void I was too blind to see. Linda tried to reach out, to bridge the gap, but I was lost in my world. Is there someone else? She asked one night, her voice quivering. No, of course not, I exclaimed, shocked at the suggestion. It's just work. Linda, you know how important this is to me. But the more I immersed myself in work, the further we drifted apart. Our home, once filled with laughter and love, turned into a silent witness of our growing estrangement. And then it happened. The mistake that would turn my regret into a living nightmare. It started innocently, a late-night email, a casual text, a friendly lunch. But soon, it spiraled into something I never intended, an affair. As I sat on the porch, the weight of my choices pressing down on me, I realized the cost of my ambition. The price was my marriage, my love, the life I once cherished. I started something that was only meant to be a fleeting thrill, I whispered into the night. And now, it's my biggest regret. As the days melded into months, the distance between Linda and me grew, like a widening chasm, filled with unspoken words and the coldness of neglect. The joy in our home faded, replaced by the monotonous rhythm of a life half-lived. One evening, I came home later than usual, the house eerily silent except for the soft ticking of the living room clock. Linda sat at the dining table, her face illuminated by the dim light, her eyes not meeting mine. Michael, we need to talk, she said, her voice steady yet laced with an undercurrent of sadness. I sighed, setting my briefcase down. I know, I'm late again. Work's been a nightmare. It's not just about you being late, Linda replied, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her coffee cup. It's about us, or the lack of us, lately. I pulled out a chair and sat down, feeling the weight of her words. Linda, I'm trying. You know how important this project is. But what about us, Michael? What about Danny? Her voice wavered. He asked if Daddy doesn't like being home anymore. That stung. Of course, I love being home with you and Danny. It's just this phase, it'll pass. But when? Michael, when will this phase end? Linda's eyes searched mine for an answer I didn't have. I reached for her hand, trying to bridge the gap that had formed between us. Soon, Linda. I promise. But promises were easier made than kept. Each day stretched longer at work, and the gulf at home deepened. Conversations with Linda became a series of monosyllabic responses, our interactions mechanical and devoid of the warmth we once shared. Michael, you're always in this room, Linda remarked one evening, standing at the doorway of my home office, her arms crossed. I looked up from my computer, the lines of code blurring before my eyes. I have to finish this. Linda, you know how it is. Do I? She asked, a hint of sarcasm in her tone. Because it seems like you're married to your job now, not me. Linda, please try to understand, I pleaded, feeling a mix of frustration and guilt. I've been trying, Michael, but I'm tired of understanding, tired of being alone in this marriage. Her words echoed in the room long after she left. I sat there, amidst the glow of my computer screen, wondering how we had reached this point. The realization that I was losing her, losing us, not at me, but the demands of my career held me captive. The weeks that followed were a blur of deadlines and missed opportunities to reconnect with Linda. I'd come home to find her asleep, the dinner she had prepared left untouched on the stove. Guilt and helplessness became my constant companions. One Saturday morning, as I sat with Danny, building a Lego castle, he looked up at me with his innocent eyes and asked, Daddy, why don't you laugh with Mommy anymore? His question jolted me. We've just been busy, buddy, I stammered, avoiding his gaze. But I miss it. I miss us being happy together, he said, his little hands fumbling with the Legos. So did I. I missed us too. The realization that my family was slipping away hit me hard. But in the whirlwind of my career ambitions, I couldn't find the anchor we desperately needed. Linda and I became like two ships passing in the night, close enough to see each other but too far to bridge the distance. As I lay in bed that night, Linda's quiet breathing beside me, the enormity of our situation weighed heavily on my heart. I wanted to reach out to hold her, to erase the growing void between us. But instead, I lay there, motionless, trapped in a prison of my own making, watching the distance grow. The change in our marriage was like a slow poison, unnoticed until the damage was done. It was during this time of loneliness and disconnect that Linda met Jonathan, a client who would unknowingly steer us down a forbidden path. I remember Linda mentioning him casually at first. Jonathan's company might be a big win for us, she said one evening, her eyes lighting up for the first time in weeks. He's the owner of a small fintech company. That's great, Linda, I replied, half distracted by an email from work. I'm sure you'll land the contract. Our conversations about Jonathan gradually became more frequent. He's different, Michael, Linda confided one night. He actually listens, seems genuinely interested in what I have to say. I nodded, barely glancing up from my laptop. Good to have a client like that, I said absent-mindedly. But I failed to notice the subtle changes in Linda. The extra effort she put into her appearance, the mysterious smiles when texting, the late-night calls she brushed off as work discussions. It was on a cold December evening that Linda's relationship with Jonathan crossed a line. I was, as usual, cocooned in my work, oblivious to the storm brewing. I'm having dinner with Jonathan tonight to discuss the contract, Linda said, her voice betraying a hint of excitement. Sure, I replied without looking up. Don't wait up for me. The dinner, however, was more than just a business meeting. I can't believe how much we have in common, Jonathan, Linda laughed, her wine glass catching the light. Jonathan leaned in, his eyes locked on hers. It's refreshing, Linda, to meet someone who understands. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, laughter echoing in the cozy corner of the restaurant. It was a connection Linda had been craving, a stark contrast to the silence that had enveloped our home. As they walked out of the restaurant, Jonathan hesitated, then said, I know this might be out of line, but I feel a strong connection with you, Linda. Linda's heart raced, a mix of guilt and exhilaration coursing through her. Jonathan, I'm married, she whispered, even as a part of her yearned for the attention he offered. I know, and I respect that, Jonathan replied gently. But it doesn't change how I feel. Their goodbye that night was charged with an unspoken tension, a line blurred but not crossed. Yet, in the days that followed, Linda wrestled with her emotions. She confided in me one evening, her voice laced with conflict. Michael, I need more from you, from us. I looked at her, the severity of her words finally sinking in. I'll try, Linda. I promise things will change. But promises were a currency I was too bankrupt to offer. My efforts were half-hearted. my presence at home merely physical. Linda, in her loneliness, found solace in Jonathan's texts, his calls. They were like a balm to her neglected heart. I just enjoy talking to him, she admitted to herself. It's not like I'm going to do anything. But emotional intimacy is a slippery slope. Their conversations became more personal, more frequent. You make me feel alive, Linda, Jonathan confessed during one of their late-night calls. And you make me feel seen, Jonathan, Linda replied, a tear sliding down her cheek. The boundary between professional and personal was blurring, and with it, the sanctity of our marriage was quietly eroding. It was a rainy Thursday when Jonathan invited Linda to his company's gala. I'd love for you to be my guest, Linda. You've been instrumental in this deal. Linda hesitated, knowing she was treading dangerous waters. I shouldn't, Jonathan. Please, he urged. As a friend. As a friend. The words echoed in her mind as she accepted, telling herself it was just a business event. The gala was a whirlwind of lights, music, and laughter. Linda was swept up in the glamour, the attention. Jonathan was ever the gentleman, attentive and charming. As they danced, the world around them faded. I wish this night wouldn't end, Jonathan whispered, his hand resting lightly on her waist. Linda's heart fluttered, guilt and desire waging a war within. We're just friends, Jonathan, she reminded him, and herself. But as they danced, their eyes locked, the unspoken truth hung heavy between them. They were on a path from which return would require more strength than either possessed. As I lay in bed that night, alone, the emptiness of our house mirrored the void in my marriage. Unaware of the gala, of the dance, of the dangerous path Linda and I were unknowingly walking down, I closed my eyes, the image of my wife laughing and dancing with another man haunting my dreams. The descent into the affair was like stepping into a swiftly flowing river, the current too strong to resist. Linda's loneliness, compounded by my neglect, had created a void that Jonathan effortlessly filled. Their meetings, initially cloaked under professional pretenses, became more personal, more intimate. One chilly evening in January, Linda came home later than usual. Her cheeks were flushed, and there was a sparkle in her eye that I hadn't seen in a long time. Sorry, the meeting with Jonathan ran late, she said, avoiding my gaze. I nodded, barely looking up from my laptop. As long as the deal goes through, I muttered, my attention already back to my screen. But it was more than just a meeting. That night, under the guise of discussing business strategies, Jonathan and Linda had crossed a line they could never uncross. Sitting across from each other in a dimly lit restaurant, the air between them was electric with unspoken tension. Linda, I know this is wrong, Jonathan whispered, reaching across the table to touch her hand. But I can't stop thinking about you. Linda pulled her hand away, a turmoil of emotion swirling within her. Jonathan, we can't. I'm married, and this isn't right. Yet, the protestations of her mind were drowned out by the yearning of her heart. The dinner ended with a stolen kiss in the parking lot, a moment that shattered the boundaries of friendship and fidelity. In the weeks that followed, Linda and Jonathan's affair escalated quickly. Secret rendezvous, hushed phone calls, and passionate encounters became their new normal. Guilt gnawed at Linda's conscience, but it was overshadowed by the exhilaration of newfound attention and affection. I remained oblivious, absorbed in my world, the late nights at the office becoming my norm. The distance between Linda and me had grown into a seemingly insurmountable chasm. One evening, as I returned home, I found Linda lost in thought, staring out the window. Is everything okay? I asked, a rare moment of concern breaking through my work-induced apathy. Linda turned, her eyes holding a sadness I couldn't fathom. Everything's fine, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. But nothing was fine. The affair, once a thrilling escape, had started to take its toll on Linda. The lies and deception weighed heavily on her, the fear of being discovered a constant shadow. Their affair was not just emotional, it had become physical, a secret shared in hidden hotel rooms and quiet corners of the city. I never meant for it to go this far, Linda confessed to Jonathan one afternoon, her voice laced with regret. Jonathan, entangled in the affair as deeply as Linda, held her close. Neither did I, Linda, but I can't imagine my life without you now. The price of their affair became increasingly steep. Linda's once vibrant personality dimmed under the burden of guilt. At home, our interactions became more strained, the air thick with unspoken accusations and silent grievances. The turning point came one fateful night. Linda had been out late again, and I had begun to harbor suspicions. Where were you? I asked as she walked in, the clock ticking past midnight. Linda hesitated, a flicker of panic crossing her face. Just with a client. Work stuff, she stammered, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to believe her, to trust in the love we once shared. But doubt, once planted, is a persistent weed. Is there someone else, Linda? I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Linda froze, the weight of my words striking her like a physical blow. No, Michael, there's no one else, she lied, her voice barely audible. But the lie was transparent, her eyes unable to meet mine. That night, as we lay in bed, turned away from each other, the distance between us was more than just physical. It was a chasm filled with lies, betrayal, and a love that had gone astray. The affair, once a source of solace for Linda, had become her prison. The price of her choices loomed large, threatening to destroy everything we had built together. As for me, the realization that I was losing my wife, my family, to a stranger's embrace was a bitter pill to swallow, a price I was paying for my own neglect and indifference. The unraveling of our marriage was like a slow, painful unwinding of a tightly coiled spring. The secrets and lies that Linda and Jonathan had woven were about to come undone, and the fallout was inevitable. It was a Thursday afternoon when the first thread pulled loose. I had come home early from work, a rarity in my hectic schedule, planning to surprise Linda and Danny with an impromptu family outing. As I opened the door, the silence of the house struck me as odd. Linda's car was in the driveway, but there was no sign of her or Danny. Wandering through the empty rooms, I felt a growing sense of unease. Then I saw it, Linda's phone, buzzing incessantly on the kitchen counter. Driven by an inexplicable urge, I picked it up. The screen lit up with a message from Jonathan. Can't stop thinking about last night. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled through their messages, each word a dagger in my heart. The realization of Linda's betrayal hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me gasping for breath. When Linda walked in, she froze at the sight of me holding her phone. Michael, I can explain, she stammered, her face pale. How long, Linda? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It's not what you think, she began, her words tumbling out in a frantic attempt to salvage the remnants of our marriage. But the trust between us had been irrevocably broken. The love and promises we had shared seemed like distant memories, overshadowed by the stark reality of her affair. In the days that followed, our home became a battleground of emotions, anger, betrayal, guilt, and heartbreak. How could you do this to us, Linda? To Danny? I asked during one of our many confrontations. Linda's eyes filled with tears. I was lonely, Michael. You were never here, and Jonathan, he was there for me. But I'm your husband, I shouted, the pain in my voice raw and unfiltered. I know, and I'm sorry, Linda whispered, her own pain evident. I never meant to hurt you. The affair had taken its toll on Linda. She became a shadow of the vibrant woman I had married, her guilt consuming her. I've ended it with Jonathan, she told me one evening, a desperate plea in her eyes. Please, can we try to fix this? But the chasm between us seemed too wide to bridge. The foundation of our marriage had crumbled, and the future we had envisioned together lay in ruins. The final blow came unexpectedly. Linda had gone to pick up Danny from school, and I was left alone, wrestling with my thoughts. That's when I found it, a letter from Jonathan to Linda, hidden in a drawer. His words were a testament to their affair, a declaration of love that stung with its sincerity. That evening, as Linda and I sat across from each other, the letter lay between us like an unspoken accusation. I loved you, Linda. I trusted you, I said, the hurt evident in my voice. I know, and I'm so sorry, Michael, Linda replied, her voice breaking. I never meant for any of this to happen. But apologies and regrets were not enough to mend the broken pieces of our marriage. The trust we had built over the years had been shattered, and the love we once shared seemed like a distant dream. As we sat in silence, the weight of our choices heavy upon us, the realization that our marriage was beyond repair was a bitter pill to swallow. The unraveling of our lives together was complete, and the price we had paid was more than either of us had bargained for. In the aftermath of our unraveling, our home became a shell of its former self, echoing with the ghosts of our past happiness. The revelation of Linda's affair with Jonathan had left our marriage in tatters, a fragile thing teetering on the brink of collapse. I remember the morning after I confronted Linda about the affair. The air was thick with unspoken words as we moved around each other, two strangers bound by a shared history and a son we both adored. Daddy, why is Mommy sad? Danny asked as we sat at the breakfast table, his innocent eyes looking up at me. I forced a smile, my heart aching. Mommy's just tired, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. Eat your breakfast, okay? But Danny wasn't easily fooled. He looked from me to Linda, sensing the tension that hung in the air like a dark cloud. Linda's eyes met mine, filled with remorse. Michael, can we talk? She asked later, once Danny had left for school. I nodded, sitting down at the table. The weight of the situation felt suffocating. I know I've broken everything, Linda started, her voice trembling. But can't we try for Danny? Can't we try to fix this? Her plea tore at my heart. Linda, how can we go back? The trust is gone, I said, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. I know I've made a terrible mistake, Linda replied, tears streaming down her face. But I'll do anything to make this right. Her words, though sincere, felt like too little, too late. The wound was deep, and I wasn't sure it could ever heal. In the days that followed, our home turned into a battlefield of emotions. We tried to keep things normal for Danny's sake, but the strain was evident. Conversations were stilted, filled with pauses and unsaid thoughts. One evening, as I sat in my office, lost in thought, Linda came in. Michael, I've been thinking, she said, a determined look in her eyes. Maybe we need some time apart. Maybe I should move out for a while. Her suggestion hit me like a punch to the gut. You want to leave? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Not forever. Just until we figure things out, Linda replied, her voice steady but her hands trembling. The thought of Linda leaving, of our family being torn apart, filled me with a sense of despair I couldn't articulate. And what about Danny? I asked, the fear of losing my son looming large. We'll figure it out. He needs both of us, Michael. Even if we're not together, Linda said, her resolve clear. The decision to separate, though heart-wrenching, felt like the only viable option. We were two people lost in a sea of hurt and betrayal, unable to find our way back to each other. The day Linda moved out was one of the hardest of my life. Watching her pack her things, memories of our life together flashing before my eyes, was a pain unlike any other. Daddy, why is Mommy leaving? Danny asked, his voice quivering with unshed tears. I knelt down, taking him in my arms. Mommy and Daddy need some time to think, buddy. But we both love you very much, I said, fighting back my own tears. Linda's departure left a gaping hole in our lives. The house felt empty without her, the silence a constant reminder of what we had lost. In the weeks that followed, Danny and I tried to find a new normal. I took leave from work, focusing on being there for him, trying to fill the void Linda's absence had created. But the specter of the affair hung over us, a dark cloud that refused to dissipate. The trust and love that had once been the foundation of our marriage had crumbled, leaving us both adrift in a sea of regret and what-ifs. As I tucked Danny into bed one night, his little hand gripping mine, I realized the true cost of the affair. It wasn't just the betrayal or the broken vows. It was the loss of our family, the shattering of the life we had built together. And that was a price too high for any of us to bear.